Hi there. I'm Chloe, and for years, I was the one who quietly made sure everything ran smoothly in our family business. I truly believed that hard work and loyalty were all that mattered. This is the story of how my own sister, the one everyone adored, tried to push me out and rewrite history. And if you've ever felt completely blindsided by the people you trust most, well, you're going to want to hear this. I was expecting a quarterly meeting. Nothing fancy, just another Monday morning, another agenda to review. My heels echoed through the marbled hallway of our company's headquarters, the place I'd practically lived in for over a decade. The receptionist, Sarah, gave me this strange, tight-lipped smile. I nodded politely, trying to ignore the weird vibe, and pushed open the glass doors to the conference room. That's when I saw the balloons. Not just any balloons, gold and white ones arranged in a dazzling arch bouquets of lilies. My mother's favorite sat on the polished mahogany table. A small table near the wall offered cupcakes and champagne. Someone had even printed a banner celebrating new leadership. My heart gave a confused jolt. I took a step in. The whole board was seated already. My parents, our general counsel, the CFO, our marketing director. Faces turned toward me. Some looked excited. Few I noticed quickly looked down. And then I saw her. Isabel, my older sister, dressed to impress in a cream-colored suit. Her hair swept back like she was about to accept an Oscar. I blinked, forcing my face into something polite, something neutral. No one had mentioned anything about a celebration. Chloe, my mother said quickly, her voice a little too bright. Glad you could make it. Glad I could make it. I had scheduled this meeting. Then Dad stood up, clearing his throat. Today marks a pivotal moment in Evergreen Solutions' legacy. We are proud to announce the transition of leadership. Isabel will be taking over as CEO. Effective immediately. Applause. The room filled with clapping. I just stood there, frozen somewhere between shock and a deep burning shame. I hadn't been told. Not a whisper. Not a memo. Isabel smiled, just soaking it all in like she was bathing in the spotlight. I didn't clap. I couldn't. My hands stayed limp by my sides as I locked eyes with her, searching, hoping for some flicker of explanation of anything. But she just turned toward the board, already moving on. I believe it's time to streamline leadership and position the company for the future, she said smoothly, her voice full of that calculated charm she was so good at. And in that spirit, I didn't even hear the next line clearly. Brenda, the HR director, walked toward me, a folder in her hand, my name printed neatly on the tab. Termination. My breath hitched. My eyes darted to our parents. They looked everywhere but at me. Isabel stepped closer, her voice a low murmur. It's not personal, Chloe. You've outlived your role. Not personal. I had signed the incorporation papers with Dad the week I turned 25. I was the one who canceled my wedding to pull the company out of a cash flow crisis years ago. I had skipped birthdays, anniversaries, even Grandma's funeral because there was always some fire to put out at Evergreen. And now I was being told I'd outlived my role. I clenched the folder Brenda handed me, already knowing what it contained. The usual severance boilerplate. Cold, sterile, final. I forced my legs to move, somehow getting myself out of that room before the applause resumed. The hallway felt longer than I remembered. My heels, usually a sound of confidence, suddenly felt too loud, too intrusive. I caught up to Isabel just before the elevators. You couldn't even tell me in private? I asked, my voice low, barely a whisper. She didn't even turn. This is business, Chloe. You always made it too personal. My badge didn't work when I tried to access my office. A junior assistant I'd mentored walked past, holding a box with my name taped on the side. My pens, my framed photo of Mom and me from the company's first gala. Even the mug that read Boss Lady in Training, a gag gift from my team. It was all packed, as if they knew long before today. Like this was all just a formality. The sun was too bright when I stepped outside. I sat in the driver's seat of my car, gripping the steering wheel, just trying to breathe. I didn't cry. Not yet. I drove home on autopilot, the city traffic a blur of noise I couldn't process. My kitchen was too quiet. The coffee maker blinked. 9:47 a.m. Still morning. Still the same day I had walked in expecting a normal meeting and been walked out as if I didn't matter, as if my 10 years meant nothing. I leaned against the counter, the box beside me. I opened it, intending to put things away, but my fingers stopped on something familiar. A pen, the wooden one Dad gave me when we launched Evergreen Solutions. Dark walnut, smooth as silk. Head had our initials engraved on it. "You're the future, Chloe," he had said, his voice so full of pride. I pressed it into my palm and sat down heavily at the kitchen table. Then it came. The sobs. Not loud, not theatrical, just sharp, short bursts that stole my breath. I felt stupid, used, erased. My phone buzzed. A news alert. Family-owned Evergreen Solutions appoints new female CEO. Continues legacy. Legacy. I had been that legacy. Just invisible now. I reached into the box for a tissue and felt something tucked under the cardboard flap. A plain envelope, no label, just my name written in careful, familiar handwriting. It wasn't in the original packing. I stared at it. It was from our legal counsel, Daniel Sterling, only addressed to me. The paper shook in my hand. I didn't open it right away. I needed to breathe first to prepare myself. But deep down, a tiny spark of something, maybe not hope, but curiosity, flickered. I knew this letter might change everything. I sat there at the kitchen table, the afternoon light slanting in through the blinds, dust motes swirling in that muted golden haze. My fingers trembled as I broke the seal. The flap resisted slightly, like it knew what was inside wasn't meant for me to see, or at least not in the way they'd planned. The paper inside was heavier than I expected. Not the cheap printer kind. This was the good stock. Embossed at the top with our family company's legal counsel's letterhead. I unfolded the pages slowly, my stomach tightening with every crease. It wasn't a severance package. It was a copy of a notarized agreement dated 4 years ago. I skimmed the opening lines and felt my breath catch. It was about the night Isabel came to my apartment crying. The night she said she was scared the company wouldn't make payroll, that if we didn't find $250,000 by the end of the week, we'd default on a supplier contract and lose our biggest client. I'd barely been able to sleep that week. I remember driving 3 hours to Austin in the middle of the night because a lawyer she trusted, her contact, was based there. I remember sitting in his dimly lit office with a paper cup of gas station coffee in hand, my hair still damp from a rushed shower, as I signed the temporary power of attorney and wired the funds from my personal savings. She had sworn, "Chloe, you'll never forget this." I mean it. Apparently she had. The document in my hands was clear. I had transferred the funds personally, and in return, I'd been granted a 10% non-dilutable voting stake in Evergreen Solutions, active unless I submitted a signed resignation. A resignation I never gave. So no, they couldn't just toss me out like an assistant who misplaced a few files. They knew. They had to know. The only reason they thought they could get away with it was if they assumed I'd forgotten, that I'd lost the paperwork, that I was still the same girl who put family loyalty before legal leverage. They were banking on my silence, on my tendency to avoid conflict. I pressed my thumb along the embossed seal. The ink hadn't faded. The signatures, Isabel's, curled and flamboyant next to mine, neat and straightforward, were still clear. Everything inside me went still. They hadn't just pushed me out. They tried to erase me after everything I'd done. My mind started racing. I went out to the garage, the door groaning as I opened it, letting in the thick late afternoon heat. Dust hung in the air, clinging to the boxes stacked along the far wall. I dug through them, old files, thumb drives, a couple labeled tax folders from years back. I found the one I was hoping hadn't gone missing during my last move. Inside, emails printed out and stapled, labeled by month. There were a few wire receipts from the bank showing the exact transfer. and a flash drive taped inside a plain manila folder. I plugged it into my laptop right there on the dusty workbench. There it was. A voice memo. Isabel's voice, recorded 4 days after the loan. "Chloe, I don't know how to thank you. If I ever forget this, I don't deserve to be in charge of anything, let alone this family." Played it twice. The second time I didn't cry. I didn't flinch. I just let the resolve settle in cold and hard. This wasn't just betrayal. It was a full rewrite of history. And I'd been too trusting, too naive to see it coming. Back inside, I gathered my laptop, the letter, and a few key documents. I packed them neatly into my leather tote, one of the few gifts Dad had given me that wasn't a hand-me-down from my mother's closet. I didn't want to be at home anymore. I needed a place to think, a neutral space. I drove down the road and stopped at a quiet coffee shop tucked between a bookstore and an insurance office. The kind of place where no one really asks questions if you stay too long. I ordered a plain iced tea, found a table by the window, and opened my laptop. For the next hour, I combed through every email I had archived. I pulled up payroll reports I'd signed, marketing plans with my comments on them, and financial breakdowns I'd personally assembled during the 2020 downturn. I saved screenshots, labeled folders, bookmarked everything. The longer I worked, the less I felt like someone licking their wounds and more like someone preparing for battle. They thought I'd go quietly. They'd underestimated me. Badly. When my inbox pinged, I paused. A new email. Subject line: "I don't agree with what they did to you. We need to talk." It was from Daniel, the company's accountant. Had been there for years, kept mostly to himself, loyal but observant. I clicked the message, my heart pounding. The coffee shop emptied out slowly, leaving only the quiet whir of the espresso machine and a soft jazz playlist echoing from overhead. I closed my laptop, tucked it into my bag, and stepped outside into the Houston dusk. A chill had crept into the air, late spring pretending to be winter for one last night. The address Daniel gave me wasn't far. I walked the few blocks past shuttered storefronts and rows of cars with dew beginning to settle on their windshields. His apartment building was old but clean, tucked between a yoga studio and a dry cleaner that hadn't updated its signage since the 90s. He answered after 2 knocks. Daniel had always looked a little tired, even back at the office. But tonight, he looked like a man who hadn't slept in weeks. "I'm glad you came," he said, stepping aside. I followed him into a living room with mismatched furniture and a pile of unopened mail stacked by the door. He motioned for me to sit, then hovered by a small table where his laptop and a stack of USB drives sat waiting, like evidence in a courtroom. "They told me to delete everything," he began, his voice low. "Minutes from board meetings, your shareholder records, voting logs. I was supposed to make it look like you never mattered." My stomach turned. I stayed silent, letting the weight of his words settle. He opened his laptop and clicked through a folder labeled "Not Forgotten." "They said if I kept quiet, I'd get a raise. They assumed I'd play along because I'm invisible too. Just the accountant." He pressed play on the first file. My sister's voice, clear and cold, filled the room. "She was never meant to last here. She's dead weight, an emotional liability." I didn't flinch, but I felt my throat tighten. Daniel glanced over, but I didn't break eye contact with the screen. Next recording. This time my mother. "She's family, but we need someone more presentable, reliable. The firm needs a clean face, not someone who disappears for months." I didn't disappear. I'd taken leave to care for Mark, my then fiancé, during his second round of chemo. I'd kept the books running from his bedside. I was answering emails at 3 a.m. while they posted filtered photos from ski resorts and European holidays. They knew it. I didn't cry. Not now. The time for that had passed. Instead, I said quietly, "Did they sign off on it? The plan to remove me?" He nodded. "Your father was hesitant. Your mother and Isabel pushed it." He didn't fight long. I stood and paced the small room, each step measured. "And you still have the originals?" Of everything. I kept everything. Out of, I don't know, guilt and fear maybe. "I'm not here to punish you, Daniel," I said, meeting his gaze. "I'm here to correct what they buried." He handed me the USB drives. "There's one more thing. The leadership retreat, the one you skipped. That's when it started. They used your absence to argue you were disengaged." A memory flickered. Me spooning broth into Mark's mouth while his body rejected another treatment. I remembered ignoring texts about mandatory team bonding and later seeing those same colleagues toasting with champagne in matching bathrobes on social media. When I returned, half my projects were reassigned. No explanation, no welcome back, just smiles that didn't reach their eyes. Back in the present, I turned toward Daniel. "You've done enough. Thank you." He nodded, eyes downcast. "I'll deny it if they come for me." "You won't have to," I said. "I'm not going through the courts yet." Back at my place, I poured a glass of water and sat by the kitchen island, the same one where ID once signed loan forms to save this family. I pulled out my old encrypted drive, copied over the files, and labeled the folder Phoenix. I opened my LinkedIn account. It had been dormant for years, another sacrifice ID made to appear loyal, to not look like I was seeking other opportunities. Within minutes of reactivation, notifications poured in. But one message froze me mid-sip. "Hey stranger," it read. "Still got that spark? I may have a proposition." The message sat open on my screen, and for a few seconds I just stared at it. Robert Pearson. I hadn't heard his name in years, not since he left our firm with nothing more than a nod and a tight smile. Had been my mentor once, maybe the only one who genuinely saw me for more than the younger daughter in a family business. The email continued, "I always knew who the real architect behind those contracts was, Chloe. Let's build something that's yours this time. Name on the door, full seat at the table. Come talk." 2 days later, I found myself standing in front of a sleek glass building in the heart of downtown, sunlight gleaming off its mirrored windows. The lobby smelled like cedar and fresh ground espresso. Nothing like the stale carpet and palpable ego of my family's office. I glanced at my reflection as I walked through the automatic doors. I didn't look broken anymore. I looked like someone who had remembered her own worth. Robert greeted me in the open concept workspace with a hug that lingered just a second longer than necessary. "There she is," he said, grinning. "The ghost they tried to bury." He introduced me to a few members of his leadership team, people who looked me in the eye, who shook my hand like I mattered. He walked me to a glass-walled conference room and slid a folder across the table. "Partner track," he said plainly. "No back rooms, no backstabbing. But I know you've got unfinished business. We can wait. Not forever, but for now." I didn't touch the folder. Not yet. That evening, back in my apartment, I opened Daniel's files again. One in particular caught my eye, labeled Bridge Grant Terms Signed. PDF. I remembered the deal vaguely. It was a fast-tracked funding injection done under pressure. I had heard about it at the tail end, too late to weigh in, or so I thought. The file loaded slowly. My stomach knotted as I scrolled down and saw it. My signature at the bottom of the document. Only ID never signed that page. Not then, not ever. I pulled out an old notebook where ID scribbled a packing list a few months back and compared the handwriting, the curves, the slant. It was close, but not mine. Isabel. Shed signed it using my name without my knowledge. It wasn't even a good forgery. She didn't know I looped my lowercase g differently. Sloppy, entitled. She must have thought ID never check, or that I wouldn't have the nerve to call her out. I leaned back, the laptop humming quietly on my coffee table. My father once told me business was about trust, that in this family your word is your bond. I wondered what he'd say now, after letting Isabel bond my name to something I never approved. My thoughts took me back to that awful boardroom day. I remembered Isabel's polished speech, the scripted smiles, the projections I didn't recognize. Shed wielded charts ID never contributed to, citing decisions I hadn't seen. And now I knew why. That forged signature had given her control Shed never earned. and I had been played like a pawn. Still, I didn't scream. I didn't cry. Instead, I went to the printer and watched the pages slide out, physical proof of their fraud. I tucked the forged contract into a plain envelope and wrote in neat black ink, "To the Office of Business Ethics, State of Texas." This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about setting fire to the lie they'd built and standing in the smoke with my head held high. I sealed the envelope and stood still in my living room for a moment, letting the silence wrap around me like armor. Then I whispered, "They want someone more presentable. Let's see how they look in front of investors." I walked back to my laptop, opened LinkedIn, and hit reactivate profile. The screen refreshed. Pings started flowing in, welcomes, old colleagues, recruiters. But one name stopped me cold. Robert again. Not a professional message this time. Just, "Hey stranger. Still got that spark? I may have a proposition." I realized I'd seen this message before, from my brief reactivation earlier. This time I smiled. The county clerk barely looked up as she slid the stamped document back across the counter to me. "All filed," she said, tapping the seal. "Effective immediately." I slipped it into my leather folio, nodded politely, and turned to leave. Behind me, her voice cut through the silence of the marble-floored hallway. "You sure this won't stir things up?" I didn't turn around. "Oh, I'm counting on it." By the time I stepped into the parking lot, the morning haze had burned off. Sunlight spilled across the asphalt like nothing was wrong with the world. But I felt it. A shift.
Quiébut permanent.
Like something inside me had finally locked into place. Back home, I kicked off my shoes, made myself a black coffee, and opened my laptop. The desktop was a minefield of folders I hadn't looked through in years: receipts, scanned contracts, forgotten backups from the cloud. I clicked on one named Mom Sync 2019 without thinking. I almost deleted it, but something made me open the logs first. Scrolling through, I found it. A call, saved by accident, synced when I was still on the family plan and helping Mom set up her new iPhone. The file was short, just under 2 minutes. The date made my stomach twist. 3 days before the board vote that ousted me. I hit play. Isabel's voice crackled to life on speaker. "Chloe is smart, yeah, but she's soft. Too loyal to fight me on anything." The line paused. Maybe whoever was on the other end laughed or nodded. Then Isabel added, "That's why I win. Mom and Dad know it. She still thinks loyalty gets you somewhere." I stopped breathing. The words hit harder than I expected. There wasn't rage, not at first. Just the kind of ache that makes your limbs feel heavy, the kind that hollows out your ribs. Shed said it so casually, like it wasn't even cruel, just true. I sat there for a long moment, the cursor blinking in the corner of the screen like it was waiting on me to do something. I whispered to the empty room, "This isn't me." I almost deleted it, but instead I clicked Save As. I created a new folder, named it Contingency for Exposure. Then I dragged the audio file inside and closed the window. I stood, stretched, and walked to the kitchen to refill my mug. My hands were steady now. By the time I sat back down, I had made up my mind. I logged into the family trust system, the one I still had legacy access to, thanks to a long-forgotten clause my sister, in her arrogance, never bothered to revoke. I navigated to the power of attorney settings and uploaded the new revocation order, legal, stamped, and signed that morning. The moment I clicked confirm, her authority to act on my behalf vanished. I smiled, not out of revenge, but because I finally felt like I was driving my own damn car again. Later that evening, I showered, pulled out a charcoal blazer I hadn't worn in a year, and packed a tote with just the essentials. My laptop, a thumb drive, the printed revocation, and the audio file burned onto a disk and labeled in red Sharpie. Before zipping it shut, I opened my email one last time and attached the recording to a new draft. I typed in my own address and filled the subject line with 5 words. "Use only if she forgets." I hit send. Then I powered off the laptop, stood up straight, and glanced at my reflection in the hallway mirror. I didn't look broken. I looked ready. I left the envelope with the business ethics clerk, walked out of the county building, and didn't look back. Not out of defiance, but because I didn't need to anymore. That part of me, the one who always glanced over her shoulder, hoping to be acknowledged, hoping to be chosen, she was gone. By evening, I was pulling up to the charity gala Isabel had spent months planning. Her face was plastered on the program, her name at the top of the donor board for Evergreen Solutions. A legacy forged with gold. My gold. The valet raised an eyebrow when he saw me step out of the car. I wasn't on the original guest list, but that didn't matter. Not tonight. Inside, the ballroom shimmered with chandeliers and curated perfection. Waitstaff in black vests glided between white linen tables, and conversations floated like champagne bubbles. Surfaced, deep, and meant to impress. When I entered, a few heads turned. Some smiled politely, others whispered. But when Isabel saw me from across the room, her expression froze for a moment. Then, just like she'd rehearsed 1,000 times, she smiled and glided to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice like velvet. "We built Evergreen Solutions on legacy, on trust, on knowing when to lead and when to let go. Some of us," her eyes flicked to mine, "understand that better than others." A polite ripple of laughter followed. I didn't flinch. Instead, I lifted my glass, locked eyes with her, and smiled. Not the kind of smile that warms a room. The kind that makes people shift in their seats, unsure if they just missed something important. After the speech, I didn't stay for the applause. As I walked toward the coat check, I passed Isabel again. Her smile faltered as I passed, but she didn't say a word. Backstage, I knew she was checking her phone, probably trying to move funds or secure her position before I made my next move. That's when it began. Her voice behind the curtain, sharp, hushed but frantic. "What do you mean access denied? That account is under my authority." Pause. "What do you mean it's been revoked? Who signed off?" She burst through the curtain, heels clicking like panic in motion. A board member stood beside her, hands raised in neutrality. "It's been updated, Isabel. Legally. We were notified this morning." I didn't stay to watch her spiral. I already knew the sound. Outside, the air was crisp. I made my way to the parking lot slowly, savoring the first breath of control in years. But I wasn't surprised when she followed. "You think this is over?" she snapped, her voice slicing the quiet like a blade. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life." I turned, let the silence stretch long enough to sting, then said calmly, "Then I guess we both have something to regret." She stepped closer. "You think you can win against me? I was chosen. You were convenient." Her voice cracked at the edges. Not from sadness, from fury. I stepped aside, giving her the path back to her car. "You have a lovely night, Isabel." Back in my apartment, the stillness welcomed me. I set my purse down, changed into sweatpants, and poured a glass of water. Then I noticed the door scratched deep. Near the lock, like someone had tried to force it open. My stomach dropped. I went down to the lobby and checked my mailbox. The metal was bent, like someone had pried at it. Security reviewed the cameras. "We caught a figure near your vehicle and the mailbox area," the officer said, "but they stayed just out of frame." No plates, no face. Nothing taken, nothing broken. Just disturbed enough to make me feel watched. Back upstairs, I sat in the dark, letting the quiet settle around me like armor. Then I reached for my phone, played the voicemail ID saved days earlier. Isabel's voice, light and smug. She won't fight back. She never does. That's why I always win. I let it play again and again. Then I whispered to the silence, "Let's change that." 2 days after filing the revocation, I parked a block away from the community center and sat in the car for a moment, watching people filter in. Isabel's white Mercedes was already there, parked close to the front with deliberate precision. She never arrived late and never without intention. I checked my purse again, even though I knew it was there. A sealed envelope, the contents notarized and final. My hand brushed against it like muscle memory. I took a steadying breath, then stepped out into the warm dusk. Inside, the HOA meeting was already underway. I heard her voice before I saw her, crisp, polished, echoing through the open hall. She was mid-presentation, gesturing toward a projection of a proposed development project. And as acting trustee, she said with that trademark smile, "I've streamlined the permitting process for Phase 1. Efficiency is everything." Phase 1 was slated to break ground on property still tied to the family trust, my share included. I didn't rush. I walked slowly down the side of the room, past rows of neighbors and board members, and gently placed the envelope in front of the chairman. No words, no announcement, just presence. People turned. She did too. For a heartbeat, she froze. Then she smiled tighter this time. "Well, look who finally decided to show up." I said nothing. Just took a seat in the back row, calm, controlled. The chairman looked confused at first. He glanced down, opened the envelope, and unfolded the papers, his brow tightening. Then he motioned to another member beside him. Whispers began. I waited. Moments later, he cleared his throat. "Before we move on with item 4, we need to pause for legal review of this revocation notice. It affects the legitimacy of recent asset control declarations." Isabel's lips twitched. "Oh, come on," she said a little too quickly. "This is last-minute theatrics. None of this is official." The chair didn't budge. "It's notarized and time-stamped. We'll table further votes until council weighs in." For the first time in a long, long while, I saw her blink in silence. Her eyes scanned the room like someone searching for backup that never arrived. After the meeting, I didn't linger. I walked out before the murmurs started, before anyone asked questions. But as I passed by the entryway, I caught the faintest thread of a whisper behind me. Someone said, "I thought she was gone for good." I kept walking. That evening I met Laura, a journalist I knew from a networking group, at a little cafe near the bayou, one she always loved for its open patio and live music. Shed already claimed a table near the back, nursing a coffee and scanning her tablet. "You were subtle today," she said as I sat down. "But surgical." I smiled faintly. "Surgical is the only kind that leaves a scar they can't ignore." She tapped her tablet. "The story's there, Chloe. The shady transfers, the silent ouster, the forged signatures. You've got enough to make people question everything they think they know about your sister, about Evergreen." "I haven't decided if I want this to be public," I said carefully. Laura looked at me for a long moment. "You helped me once, Chloe, when no one else would. I wouldn't be in this job without you, so I won't push. But it'll be ready when you are." I glanced out toward the street. "People love a Phoenix story, don't they?" "They love the fire more," she corrected gently. I didn't commit to anything, but I didn't stop her from looking into it either. On the drive home, a song came on the radio. Fleetwood Mac, "Landslide." Mom used to play it on repeat while cleaning the kitchen on Sundays. I could almost smell lemon polish and hear the dishwasher clattering. Her voice echoed in my head, from so many years ago. "Let her shine, Chloe Bug. It's her turn." I spoke into the quiet cabin of my car. "It was never a turn, Mom. It was a sentence." I pulled into my driveway just as the last note faded. Inside, I dropped my purse on the hall bench and took a moment to stand still. No noise, no rush, just breath. Then I walked to the drawer at the end of the hallway, the one I hadn't touched since before the restructuring. I opened it slowly and pulled out the old ledger, wrapped in faded floral fabric. Isabel always swore it had been lost in a flood during a warehouse move years ago. I never corrected her. My thumb brushed the edge of the binding. It was heavier than I remembered. Not just from ink or paper. Carried weight because now it had context. I picked up my phone, stared at Laura's name for a moment, then pressed call. She answered on the second ring. "I'm ready," I said. I stayed up most of the night before, reviewing every line in the ledger, every receipt, every scribbled annotation in my own handwriting. It wasn't just about money. It was about memory. Proof that I had been there all along, holding up the foundation while they painted over the cracks. At 6:04 a.m., Laura texted one word, live. I didn't move for a moment. I just stared at the screen as the article began spreading. The headline was bold, simple, and direct. The Silent Founder. What really happened inside Evergreen Solutions. She hadn't exaggerated. The article was clean, tight, and impossible to ignore. It began with our origin story, 2 sisters and a dream. But then it peeled back the years. Document scans, timeline graphics, side-by-side images of my name on founding documents, and photos of Isabel accepting awards alone. Laura hadn't just written a story. She told the truth. Within hours, my inbox lit up like it hadn't in years. A message from an old intern, Darius. I always thought something didn't add up. Thank you for speaking. Another from one of our earliest clients. Chloe, I always respected your quiet steadiness. Let me know if you ever start something new. Then came the one I didn't expect. Chloe, I'd like to speak to you about next steps. McClure Everglyn Capital. McClure had been one of our seed investors. If he was reaching out now, that meant a real shift. That meant money was paying attention. I was pouring a cup of coffee when my phone rang. I didn't even need to check the screen. You vindictive witch. Isabel's voice was so shrill it clipped through the receiver. Do you think this will fix anything? Do you think they're going to see you as a victim? You're pathetic. I built this. I didn't say a word. Just hit end. I let her scream into silence. By late afternoon, a formal letter arrived in my inbox. Her lawyer was filing a cease and desist and threatening a defamation suit. Attached to the complaint were official financial records meant to show her exclusive leadership. But as I scrolled through the attached files, something stopped me cold. It was a report from 2019, the bridge grant proposal Isabel had pushed forward without me. And right there, buried on page 6, was the same falsified ledger entry she had used to convince the board ID become non-essential. Only now she was citing it in a legal claim, as if no one had kept the original. She didn't know I had. That evening I met Mr. Peterson, my attorney, in his small but tidy office. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. I take it this is urgent, he asked, closing his office door behind me. I handed him the fabric-wrapped ledger, the same one ID kept hidden for years, tucked behind old tax boxes and moving files. This is the original, I said. She's lying again, but this time on record to the court. He opened it, flipped to the right section, and gave a quiet whistle through his teeth. Well, this just turned into perjury. He looked up, his eyes sharp now. We're not on defense anymore, Chloe. By nightfall, the story had made it to national syndication. Not front page, but loud enough to rattle. And rattled they were. I drove back through the old business park near the highway where we first started Evergreen Solutions. Most of the lights were off, but my old office still had that warm glow through the blinds. I parked, walked inside with permission from the new tenant, an architect who admired what we'd once built. My old desk was gone, but in the corner still sat the wide, low-back chair our father built with his own hands when I first joined. Pine sanded smooth. The initials C.G. carved in the backslat, faded but proud. I ran my hand along the grain. For years, ID felt like I was filling in for someone else. Like the role was never meant for me, like I had to earn a seat at a table I helped build. But tonight, I didn't feel like an understudy. I didn't feel like a placeholder. I felt like the author. And that night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was afraid, but because I was finally ready. 2 weeks later, I stood before the courtroom doors with both feet planted. Not shaking, not second-guessing, just steady. Inside it was quiet. Isabel sat at the opposing table, dressed like she was still trying to win a pageant. Her lawyer looked tense, tapping a pen, flipping pages they should have reviewed better. The judge took his seat and adjusted his glasses. We've reviewed the financial documents submitted by the plaintiff, he began, his voice firm but not theatrical. There are discrepancies between the version submitted by Ms. Isabel Hayes and the original ledger obtained by the defense. He looked directly at her. Submitting forged financial records to this court is not just an error. It is a criminal offense. The room didn't gasp. It just went still. Isabel didn't speak. Her jaw locked in place, eyes wide, but she didn't look at me. She looked at the judge like had spoken a language she'd never been forced to learn before. Consequence. Her lawyer leaned in, whispering frantically, but she shook her head, like someone refusing to believe gravity. The judge continued, "Given the submission of fraudulent material, we're referring this case for criminal review under Penal Code 115. Additionally, the court orders financial penalties to be paid to the defendant for damages incurred." Just like that, it was over. Outside, reporters were already gathering. Microphones, questions, camera lenses. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. I walked past the crowd calm. I let the story speak for itself. Later that afternoon, I met Laura at a corner coffee shop near her newsroom. We sat near the window, the sunlight warming our hands on ceramic mugs. She stirred her drink, glanced at me. "Do you regret any of it?" I thought for a moment. Not about the courtroom, not about Isabel. I thought about the quiet Sunday mornings I spent buried in work while she entertained clients. The nights I answered emails from the hospital when Dad was sick. The silence I accepted every time my name was left off a press release. "I regret thinking I needed their permission to matter," I said finally. Laura didn't respond right away. Just nodded, the way someone does when they know you've said something that took years to find the words for. That evening, I returned to the new studio. A co-working space ID helped open with two other women. Both founders had been forced out of their own companies. One had been pushed out by her ex-husband, the other by a board of directors who didn't think she looked global enough. We had no receptionist, no glass trophy cases. Just worn hardwood floors, real plants, second-hand desks, and freedom. My workspace was simple. A laptop, a corkboard, a window that caught the morning light, and the chair, Dad's chair, cleaned, polished, the wood now warm amber in tone. I had a small plaque engraved and fastened along the back. It read, "To the one who stayed silent, and then spoke the loudest." I didn't cry when I read it. I just sat, let the weight of it settle. My story wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming. As I looked out the window at the street below, bustling with people chasing their own dreams, I felt something I hadn't in years. Stillness. Not silence, not submission. Stillness. Later that night, I typed out an email to Laura with one line. "If they reach out again, tell them I've said all I needed to." And then I recorded a voice note for myself, something I could return to if ever I forgot. Sometimes justice doesn't roar. It shows up quietly in a courtroom, in an old chair, or in a new beginning. I sat back, let the words echo, and then I asked myself aloud, not needing an answer, have you ever had to walk away from the very thing you built, just to save yourself? This whole journey, it wasn't about burning bridges as much as it was about finding my own footing on solid ground. It taught me that true strength isn't about shouting the loudest, but about knowing your worth, even when others try to diminish it. It's about holding on to your truth quietly and firmly, until the world is ready to listen. Sometimes the quietest voices carry the most resonant truths. What are your thoughts on all this? I genuinely love to hear them in the comments below. And if these kinds of stories speak to you, please consider subscribing to the channel. If you'd like to support our storytelling journey here, you can use the Super Thanks feature. Giving in its own way is part of healing too. Thanks for listening.